Hello again. I am back. I'm going to show you. I have made a body from the mold. Did a thin layer of fiberglass mat. Might not be sufficient, I'm not sure, but I just got tired of putting down fiberglass. I only put one layer. My plan was to do two, but I just got burned out. I did put heavy resin, so that might offset it. It's going to make it way too much, but at this point, I just need a body to work with. So I was going to do this in stop motion, but it makes an entire day's worth of work condensed down to like 29-30 seconds and doesn't add my commentary. So I'm going to go ahead and do this in real time, and you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing this all by myself, so it's a bit of a challenge because that mold is heavy. 3 of us put it on top of that table when I first did it, so I'm not sure how I'm going to get it back on that table, but I really want it up high so I'm not working on my hands and knees down on the ground. So let's get going. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is hold this leg out and at least get the table stood up. Or maybe do this. By the way, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm just experimenting. Well, the first challenge. There we go. All right, step 1. Slide this as far forward as I can. Yeah. Okay. Trying to decide if I should flip it around for the camera. For those that don't know, it takes about at least twice as long to do something filming as it does to do it without filming. All right, I think I might flip it around. The other disadvantage to filming is I can't listen to my music because then they won't let me monetize my videos, even though my monetization has amounted to $46 last time I checked, which they don't pay until you get to $100. But still, someday it may be worthwhile monetizing my videos. All right, I may just need to move my camera. Oh, no, I can try moving the table, but it really doesn't want to move. Let's see. There we go. That didn't sound good. Oh, that wasn't good. Well, there's some repair work to do there. Not sure exactly what. Oh, it's disassembled and off. That's good enough. Okay, the way this mold works, and all molds work, is you have to be able to remove the part. And with all of these intricate curves and bends, there's no way to remove this part from this mold if it was all one piece. So it is made in multiple pieces. I need to find something, and it's bolted together. I need to find something to put all the bolts in. So what I'm going to do is take this apart a little at a time, because I suspect I missed some spots. Hopefully not, but if I did, I can quickly bolt back on the mold and fix the spot. If I don't do this piece by piece, then I would have to make a section and graft it in. It could be done that way, but it would be a little bit harder. I ended up having to buy like 100 nuts and bolts, twice as many washers, because there's another whole set of molds for the back. I thought I was going to do both simultaneously, but I lost my help. So since I'm doing this on my own, there was no way to simultaneously do two of them. All right. So you learn something new, or at least I do, pretty much every day. In this case, I learned that when I assemble it, make sure that I can get the tool in to remove it. It's a whole lot faster. Okay. So this piece right here that spans is a single piece. So I am going to see if I can remove it. I might not be able to, because it is pinched in between this and this. And maybe you can't see it, but there are indentions right here that locate this, a half circle or a quarter circle, quarter sphere here, and a quarter sphere here. And that's it. So I bet I will not be able to get this out without at least loosening the side pieces. So one of the big questions is the part stuck to the mold? All right, it looks like I'm going to have to at least loosen the lower bolts. But as long as I don't lose orientation and location, it's not a big deal to loosen these. I just would rather not, if I could avoid it. All right, so when I loosened that bolt, I saw this gap open up. That's promising that I might be able to remove that. I did not see this one flex out when I removed that bolt. Okay, so all right, there's a little gap there. All right, what I'm going to do is I have door wedges, shims for doors. I have wooden ones and I have plastic ones, but they are in the house. So I'm going to have to go get them. So just take just a second and I'll get a hammer while I'm at it. All right, I'm back. Sorry, I thought I knew exactly where those shims were. I do not, but I found some paint stir sticks. They'll work in a pinch. The shims are better because they're tapered and wedge shaped. All right, so then what I do is pry this in here, and you can use a lot of different things. There we go. So I don't know if you heard that, but it popped, which means it released a little bit. I should be able to lift this up a little bit maybe, rather than pull that one out since it's already in there. I will leave it. Same thing here. I have a gap. Once you get a gap, that's the start. And finding a spot to get started here. That's a challenge. There we go. So if you do this right, you leave a little bit of excess fiberglass mat or cloth so that you have a dry edge to grab onto. That of course works a little better with cloth because you need to get the edge to release first. Once you get the edge to release, you get something underneath it, and that's where my hammer comes in. I've hurt my hand in the past using it. I do learn from my mistakes sometimes. There we go, I think. All right, that did separate, but not where I was putting that wedge in. So I will put this wedge in where that one should have separated. So what you do is you just work your way around, and if your release is done well, this thing should just pop right out. What I did with the mold was I waxed it when they were separate pieces, assembled it, re-waxed it, put PVA on, polyvinyl, I think it's acetate if I'm not mistaken. If you were ever, when you were a kid, put Elmer's glue on your hand and let it dry and then peeled it off, basically that's what PVA does. So it's an extra measure, not required. You could just wax, or you could use PVA and not wax. Either one will work. I decided to do both because I did not want to risk having an issue getting all of this out. Unfortunately, my stick fell out. And now I have to find a spot to put it back in. Or I have to come back to here. All the way across it. Not a big deal, obviously. Just prefer that didn't happen. Those shims work much better. I will find them at some point. Unfortunately, you can't see from your angle, but this is actually releasing very well. Which in this case means that good job. Whoops, with both the PVA and so this is the fiberglass resin. There we go. Where there's no mat underneath, and the gel coat. Okay, so this thing has released so far. I'm going to try popping this mold up from the bottom. That may or may not work. And there's not much there, but guess what? That seemed to work. All right, let me do the same thing here. Stick some wedges in here. Okay, so this side has a nice gap, and it looks like it's going to release. Well, how about that? All right, there we go. So you can see that there is almost no gel coat. A little bit here, which means we didn't get a great job, but you can see that it flakes off really easily. So not a bad job of waxing, just not perfect. And that's good. If I can keep this protected from the elements, that means a light coat of wax next time. And this will be ready to go. And there will be a next time. I'm going to make this next one out of carbon fiber, or actually have it made out of carbon fiber, since I have no clue about carbon fiber. All right, so now I look at the surface and I see that there's a spot there where the fiberglass is separated from the gel coat, but minor issue to repair that. I did not use putty or clay in the seams because for me, I thought it's easier to just sand off this gel coat that went in between the seams. Others would go in and do it, put basically where there's a seam, you run putty or clay there. You can wet your finger and smooth it out. I figured it would take at least an hour, oh gosh, probably 2 hours honestly, to go through and do every seam in the mold. I thought, you know what, I'd rather make the part, save that 2 hours now, and then when I get it pulled out of the mold, I can go off and just sand or grind the seams down. Personal preference, which route to go. Either way will work. Okay, so now I have to decide which piece to pull off next, which mold. I can either pull off the side, or this piece right here is a separate piece, and it only has 1, 2, looks like 3 bolts hold, 4 bolts holding on. Let me try that. But anyway, so far, I mean, there's some surface defects on this, but I did not expect a perfect surface, so I'm fine with that. The other thing is, by having the bolts come in from the bottom, when I loosen this, then the bolts stay in here and the nuts just rest on top. This one I did the other way. No big deal, except that I can lose the washer when I do that. All right. And last but not least, all right, I think that's got all 4 pieces, so I'm going to do the same thing again. It is separated here a bit. I'm going to go ahead and loosen the next bolt down. Again, just to get a little bit of flex. And this is what I was talking about, losing the nut. But there's a tight fit here. It would have been difficult to put the bolt in from the other direction. Not impossible, just difficult. All right, that will allow this, should allow this to flex out. I will put one of these in here. Now notice when I pry on areas that are flanges. All the flanges are for is to hold the bolt pieces together, so I'm not damaging any surface that will be part of the final part. So I'm not messing up the surface finish. Okay. One of the things you can do is put a wedge in here and leave it, and over time it pops loose. All right, I'm gonna leave that for now. Go to the other side. Ah, mistightening a bolt. Or not, however you want to look at it. Fastener. All right, let's find another wooden wedge. Or shim. I am going to lightly tap on this and see what happens. And I'll use my shims or wedges just to see if I can convince this to let loose a little bit. That one's loose, that one's loose. That doesn't really want to let loose there. I'm trying not to use a lot of force if I can avoid it. Okay, I can see it's released in the center there. Not wanting to release here, which kind of makes sense. Okay, let me put a wedge in here. Tuck this in. Same thing down here. And let me go ahead and loosen the next set of bolts. At this point, I'm actually pleased with what I'm seeing. If there is a thin spot, I can come in from the inside. I'm going to run a sander across the inside surfaces. Smooth them out, and I can put another layer, complete layer of fiberglass on this thing if I need to. Don't know if I'll need to. All right. Now, the more curves and surface area you have, the more difficult it's going to be to convince these things to let loose. Because all it takes is one spot that decides it doesn't want to let loose, and the thing just plain isn't going to come out easily. Okay. A hammer. See a little gap there. I'm going to take advantage of that little gap, hopefully, and make it into a bigger gap. Same thing, I hear it. I don't know if you can hear it from there. I hear it separating, which is a good sign. And I have to be careful not to go too far in because I'll be pounding against the actual body panel. Obviously don't know what to do. I need to get it to separate a little bit right here. You know what? I can also remove that piece. It's completely separate, but that's neither here nor there. Next time I make a mold, I didn't make this one, but when I make a mold, I'm going to make sure there's mold flanges, one sticking out further than the other, so that when I do this, I have something to tap on. All right. Wow, this side's just coming right off. This piece right here just doesn't particularly want to. Now, of course, all of this has to eventually be separated, so it's just a question of what do I think is the easiest route to go. See a little gap. If I had that wedge, it would go right in this gap. There we go. All right, same thing here. I'm just going to tap this back. All right, it is released on this side and this side. Not released here, and I don't want to pound on the body particularly. Let me see if I can get this other side to do something. It has a gap. anything. I wish something hung over a little bit. It doesn't. Maybe I can condense this. Yep. Alright, let's grab a piece of wood. Someplace that's not doing a lot. Same thing here. Okay. That wedge made it to where this wedge is loose, so now I take this one, move it a little further in, and everything is separating. Just doesn't quite want to let loose. Yeah, I can see it's let loose here. Oh, but this thing, there's a deep V that you cannot see from there. So that is probably why that's not wanting to let loose. So rather than fight with that, I'm going to go to the next part. Of course, this is where having helpers would be beneficial. Of course, I'm not sure where having helpers would not be beneficial, but in this case, removing a bunch of bolts does not require a high level of skill. Okay, so this piece right here is completely separate. So I should be able to, again, using my wedge, finding a starting spot is always difficult. Let's tap on a little. See a little bit of a gap. I could cram something in here like a screwdriver, but then I would be potentially damaging part of the mold, even though this part of the mold is really inconsequential to actual part quality. I'd just rather not do that. There we go. Because all it takes is a little bit of help. All right, don't know if you heard that pop. That pop is a good sign that potentially this thing is just going to come right off. Okay, what I'm looking for is one of these that's real loose, which means it will be easier to put back in. Like I said, that package, I have several dozen wedges. I should have found it before I started. Now, just because this moves is not necessarily a good sign, because this piece dangles in air. Okay. Luckily, there's a little spot where the fiberglass sticks out, and that allows me to get hold and start separating this fiberglass from the mold. And again, it's releasing relatively easily. little persuasion. All right, that's got this released, it looks like up to here. There we go. This pulls out easily. This one pulls out just not easily. And this looks completely separated right here. By the way, highly unusual to have a non-windy day. Usually I'm fighting with the wind. Of course today, it's already a little bit warm. Breeze would actually be nice, but it's not raining. It's not bitterly cold. So I'll take what I can get. Okay, as far as I can tell, this thing should. Okay, so while I see this wiggling, you would think that's a good sign, but I actually am seeing the whole part inside of here wiggle. This whole inside surface is what has to release. And it's hard to get parts that are perpendicular to the surface to release on their own. Okay, but this is loose enough. Let me see if I can wedge something here. And convince this to let loose without breaking stuff. Part of the challenge is this is the first time I'm going to be using this mold on the car it belongs on. This is the same mold I used for the C8 project, but it wasn't made for it. So the parts that are critical where the actual edges are could be different between the two. In this one, I would obviously rather not damage some surface that is critical to the final part. All right, I can see it is wanting to let loose. It's almost there. Wait, wait. Wait for it. It would have helped if there was a little more draft here and here. What draft is it's an angle, like so. And what's happening is the part is getting pinched right here. And that's what's holding this, because it's loose. It just is an interference fit now. So there should have been a draft here. I'm pulling my wedges out so I don't break them, because I found out the more you have as a general rule, the better off you are. But as you can see, it's loose. If there was a draft here, this thing would have popped off by now. Man. We're almost there. All right. Brute force sometimes is the answer. Sometimes not. This is almost funny. I mean, literally. I think if this was out of the way, I might be able to get it to come up, but it's not. You can see that. I guess I'm going to have to wait to get this the rest of the way off. And again, this is where another person would help. They could pull on one side. While I pulled on the other. There it comes. Come on, baby. Wow. All right, that was tough. But the good thing, no sticking to the mold. Bad thing, there's an area right here where the fiberglass didn't cover completely. That's why the gel coat just comes off like that. Not a big deal. Just would have been nice if that wouldn't have happened. Okay, the next mold piece. This piece right here is a separate piece, and this piece right here is a separate piece. This piece right here should be relatively easy to remove. Famous last words. Okay. You can see that that's let loose there, so the next piece is this little U-shaped piece. So let me pull this out, and we will loosen the fasteners on the U-shaped piece. It's actually entertaining the first time I use this mold because I actually had no clue what any of these pieces were. So I didn't know what to be careful about and what not to be careful about. All right, one more here. When I made the parts for the C8, I made each of these parts individually because I thought I was going to have to widen the whole thing. After I got finished, I think that I could have done it in one piece and it would have slid over the front. I'm not positive. Oh, at some point I will check that in the future. All right, so this is loose there, and assuming there's not another draft issue, that would come right out. There we go. Just a little force. Now at this point I am completely separate from the body. It is just the mold itself that I'm fighting with. Let me go over the other side and remove the same new piece over here. And of course my hope is that between the two there's going to be enough flex. This thing will virtually fall apart. Okay. Hopefully I'm speaking loud enough as I do this. I get accused of speaking too loud, normally, especially when I'm on the phone, having a conference call with coaching call with clients. All right, same thing here. It's loose. It just doesn't quite want to completely let go. And I don't know what to loosen. Ouch! You have to watch out because there's little pieces of fiberglass that stick out that will bite you. Don't know what's holding this on. Because it looks to me like it should just come right out. Again, it may be a draft problem. It could be that it needs to come up. Ow, I'm bleeding. That got me good. All right, I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to get this piece off. Okay, so this piece does not seem to want to let loose. As I was hoping would happen. And it has let loose. There we go. And let's see if this works. Worked over there. Not quite. So you can see this is not all that much unlike a jigsaw puzzle. Let's see if any of these happen to have a thin front section. Of course not. All right. But this one does. So I'm going to take a wedge behind here to save what I've got here and try to convince this to wedge in there, which it did. Okay. As far as I can tell, it should just let loose. All right, sometimes a little vibration helps. And the other thing that helps is leverage. If I pull on this side, the amount of force on that side is heavily multiplied. As long as this part is strong enough to withstand the force. All right. Just a little bit here holding it. It's this corner right in here this step. Sometimes vibration is what it takes to convince it to let loose, and it did. All right, again, every time I pull parts off, I check to see how well it got waxed. In this case, it got waxed well. Areas here, hopefully, I don't think this is a critical part. I think this is the opening for the grill. It will actually be trimmed to size. There is a bad spot on the mold right here. Probably should have filled that with clay or even repaired it with fiberglass. I didn't. Again, I tend to do what makes things expedient, both to my benefit and detriment. Okay. So the question becomes, will that come out? It did. Same thing, decent job. Waxing, should be the same thing here. Again, a little bit of draft would have made a huge difference. There we go. Man. All right, same thing. Relatively clean. All right, I look at the surface. There is actually a hole right here that'll need to be repaired. It's small enough that I can probably just put fiberglass in from the inside. As I look through at this through the light, you can see thin areas. You'll see light coming through. Okay, what do we have here? All right, at this point I have the two sides and the large piece here. So I just need to pick a side and remove it. I'll just randomly start with this side. Some of these bolts got put in from the opposite side, which means I need to get to the back side again. Something I just learned right now is that I probably want them all to come from the back side so that I can literally run down with the tool, remove all of the nuts. Or I could do it all the other way. But this way I didn't have to worry about where anything was. And I can take my hammer and remove the bolts. Whereas Whereas if it was on the other side, that would be just a little bit more difficult to do. Not a lot, but anything you can do to make the job easier is definitely worth doing. It could be, yeah, okay, so what it is, these are very hard to get to. There's a metal structure brace here, and that's why those got put in from that direction. No big deal, but shorter bolts could be used and that would resolve that. These bolts are way longer than they need to be. Now I can already tell you that I'm going to have issues with this releasing because of those vents. They're V-shaped, and I can already see they're going to be a little bit of a challenge. Hopefully not too much. Okay. One more. I can loosen this nut with my finger and spin the bolt with my finger. No big deal, but that's way easier than fighting with the tools. Okay. Unless I am mistaken, that means this whole side. Oh, minor issue. These little fender pieces obviously need to come off. Again, I'm not sure why the need for this. I will find out. C6, which is what it was on. Off easily. Okay. By the way, Jake, great job waxing this. Had you missed spots, I would be cursing you right now. And I don't normally do that, but believe me, after some of the molds and parts I've had to release. Okay. Again, I'm just verifying that I didn't miss any hardware and looking for places to get this to release. This is an area where I'm not so sure I did so good. Because there's a step in here on this wheel well. The thing was upside down, and I was fighting gravity and wasn't exactly the most careful about how I did this. So this is an area where when I get this off, I may see that I wish I had spent a little more time and been a little more careful. We will see. All right. Again, finding that starting spot can sometimes be really difficult. See if I can cheat. This will either go under there or it will do what it's doing, which is to start cracking. But there we go. And here's the starting spot. Same thing here. All right, so I'm going to use a little shock treatment, vibration, and I'm going to move to the back. I purposely did like I said and left a flange here on the back side. So this should be much easier to get started, and sure enough, much easier. All right. There we go. Such a nice feeling when it actually lets loose. All right. I think it's going to let loose. Let's see. Yep, just as I suspected, there are some spots. But not enough to warrant putting it all back together and attempting to repair it that way. The advantage of putting it back together is I would get this nice smooth surface finish on anything I make. If I repair it from the outside, it won't have this nice smooth finish. I will actually have to sand or grind or whatever to get a nice smooth finish. So let's see what I got. Like I said, I knew this area right here was not good because I was fighting gravity. This thing was sitting this way. So when I tried to put the fiberglass under this lip, I don't know if you can see this lip here, it kept falling down. I finally gave up in frustration because I needed to flip the whole thing over, and at that time, I wasn't willing to do that. Okay, overall, a little bit of alligatoring right here, but it was 2 days from the time that I put this thing in the mold and I put the gel coat on and then put the fiberglass behind it. So this could have been an absolute disaster. What does surprise me is it popped out of these vents relatively easily. I didn't run into a problem. Again, I guess because the angle is good enough. So I could try to separate this right now. Might as well, it's got to be done at some point. Or I could wait and do the other side. But since I'm here and you're here, let's go ahead and do this. Okay. Again, the challenge is finding a starting spot. By the way, I should be wearing gloves because if there's a piece of mat sticking out that got sufficient resin on it, it ends up being like needles, and they hurt. Again, you saw that earlier. Okay. The other advantage to doing this thin, even though that's not the way it should be, this thing should be a lot thicker, is that it's flexible, and that means when I'm trying to remove it from the mold, it has a little more give, so I can do stuff like this. There we go. What a wonderful sound. All right, there's a spot in here, you can't see it, there's a spot in here that could have been thicker. All right, so with any luck, I may be able to just lift this thing off of here. There we go. More than halfway done. Now let's go to the other side. The other advantage to doing a thin layer on this is that, again, I'm working by myself. If I make this the full thickness, it's going to be heavy. The guy I bought the molds from warned me that in building this, you end up taking it apart and putting it together about 100 times. And so the heavier you make your prototype part, the harder it's going to be to put it on and remove it. And he also works by himself like I do, so that is definitely a consideration. He said if you make it full thickness the first time, you're going to have a helper help you the entire way. And since I don't have that, I decided to go ahead and make it thinner. Okay. Again, this is that separate piece. I should be able to just tap on it with my hammer. Famous last words. There we go. Again, clay indicates good wax job and or good job of putting the PVA on. Don't know which, doesn't matter which. All that matters is it was easy to get off. All right. Now to take this side off. Let me go ahead and get my container. You can see I've already filled up this entire container with nuts and bolts. Let me start a new one. By the way, I use these cottage cheese containers because fiberglass doesn't stick to them and I can reuse them. In the past I used tin cans, and of course every tin can was a one-use proposition because the fiberglass hardened in the tin can. This, on the other hand, just peels right out. That's funny, there's actually two of these, one inside the other. All right, for some reason, that one, I cut the lip off. I was doing something specific with this, I can't remember what. Okay, so I need to get a bigger container for my nuts and bolts for this. Put that on my mental to-do list, which of course doesn't last very long. Okay. Okay, pleasantly to my surprise, I'm going to speak louder just in case I need to. All of the bolts were put from the inside out. Even though we missed a couple, I see two here. Hopefully not a big deal. We'll know. Okay, I think I got all the bolts. I got stabbed again. Part of the job. Okay, once again, I don't know if you can see, but there's a little extra here that I purposely
put on here so that I had something to get started with. Once I get it started, I put my stick in there. So don't know if you can see, but this thing flexes when I put the wood in here. If I had done it the real thickness, it wouldn't be flexing. Wood. Okay, that was easy enough. Now I believe I did a better job on this side of getting this fender edge, and the reason why is because I flipped this up on its end. Going to put a wedge in here. At some point, this thing is probably just going to fall off. Hopefully not on me, or actually hopefully not hurt me when it does so. And I just heard it pop. Okay, so each one of these is relatively heavy. Obviously when you put them all together, the thing gets really, really heavy. Okay. Another fender down. No excess spots that stuck. Obviously that was the case, otherwise it would have been a lot more difficult to get that loose. All right, now let's see if I can get the rest of this to let loose. I gotta get that starting point. The gel coat overran here, which is okay, but it also makes it harder to get a starting spot. Not a big deal, but a little bit of a challenge. There we go. And luckily I overran the mat just a little bit, giving me something to grab onto. There's an L-shaped lip here. It's where the hood sits down in. That makes it more difficult to come off. Anything that does an L shape like that, you're dealing with multiple angles when you're trying to get it to release. And of course, it doesn't want to do that. There we go. This along here. Get it to release there. Okay. There we go. All right, now I need to move this a little bit. Luckily, it's a whole lot lighter now that I have the two sides and part of the front off. Let's see if I can do this without the whole thing crashing to the ground. No guarantees. All right. Okay. Moment of truth. Again, I can use leverage to my advantage. It's 4 feet roughly from here to there. So by doing this, I get some leverage, and getting underneath these lips really is crucial convincing these things to release. You don't have to do that, but then it just takes that much more force at the other end, and you do stand a higher chance of damaging something. So after all this work, I'd prefer not to damage anything if I can avoid it. Okay, I need another piece of wood, which is of course on the ground. All right, there's a corner here that I really need to get under. I think that's what's holding this in place. And sure enough, as soon as I got that corner loose, the whole thing just moved. There we go. Okay, this is going to be interesting. Me lifting this whole thing. Okay. You can see that if you look at this, it's not really sturdy because there's honestly not a lot holding this in place. I'm going to have to look at it on the real car and figure out how does this thing get any kind of structural strength to it. Maybe there's something it bolts to. I don't know. This is that area that I was talking about where I did not use the clay, but you can see most of this just comes off with my finger. I could take a file or a sander or virtually anything, my finger, and break that off. Okay. It is released. I have no earthly idea how I'm going to maneuver this by myself because it's long and wide. It is not heavy at all. Nothing like the mold, which is very heavy. You can see I can literally lift this thing up. Maneuver it all by myself. And again, that's why I made it so thin, because I knew I would have to do this by myself. The disadvantage of making it so thin is it doesn't maintain 100% of its structural shape. So I may be able to get this thing to flex to do something that once I make a little part to full thickness, it won't want to flex. Hoping that's not the case, hoping that it doesn't come back to bite me. Maybe I'll try flipping it. I was wanting to show you the finished result, is why I'm thinking so hard. And of course my shade trees are actually in the way. Okay, again, a place where another person would help. This is that area I was talking about that was so hard to get to release. It's because of this V in the front. It did crack right here where this meets. Not sure if that's significant or not. Again, I don't mind doing minor repairs if it makes my job easier or saves a lot of time. Okay. And again, I'm having to be a little more careful than normal because it is so thin. I don't want to break anything, which I just did. But that's okay. Like I said, I knew I would have some issues. Okay, let me flip it around this way. You know what? I'm just going to pull it off and set it over here because I really need to get this mold off of the table. Okay. I do know I did carry this mold by myself at one point. I do know that I can get in between here. Edges. Well, it's awkward. Well, I was going to say it is possible to do, but it just so happens that edges are catching. All right, so that. While it's not real heavy, it's not exactly real light. Okay, one Corvette front end, and a final mold section. All right, and again, I don't see any place where it's stuck, and that's obvious. Otherwise, it would have taken me many hours to get these apart instead of just what it did. Let me Now this is going to be a lot heavier than that. But it's sturdy, so it has that going for it. Or for me, whichever case may be. All right. Once again, I can come in here and carry this thing off. Now, I have a table to work on, or with. But rather than do that, I am going to show you what I've got. And then that'll conclude this video. All right, I'm kind of guessing at where I'm pointed because I have the image right there. Okay, so this is what the part looks like. You can see there's a couple of areas. That's what's called alligatoring. It means there was a reaction between the fiberglass and the gel coat. Very minor, obviously that could be sanded off. This green that you see is the PVA. It's that Elmer's glue-like material that separates the two. You can see that in this case, it's a very thin layer of PVA. PVA is water soluble, so it'll wash off. Most times, part of it sticks to the mold and part of it sticks to the part, but it looks like almost all of it stuck to the part this time. That's that green tint right there, and you can see that it's stuck to the gel coat rather well. All right, so this is my front end for my car. It is not perfect, but I didn't expect it to be perfect, but it actually came out as good or better than I expected. All of these extra areas can be broken off. I think it's only needed up to where this 90-degree edge is. I have absolutely no clue how much of this is and isn't needed. I suspect it might be able to be cut right there. What I used as a guide is typically when you make a mold, you make the part, you decide where you're going to separate it, and then you put a bunch of little squares together and hot glue them, whatever it takes to get a flange that you can work with. And that gives this thing structural rigidity. And so any place I saw that there were periodic seams, I assumed that that was strictly for a flange. Place where that's a question is right here. How much of this is flange and how much of this is needed? You can see here, that's obviously that's part of the mold. Same thing here. There's some alligatoring right there. And a lot of alligatoring right there. Here's the extra that I talked about leaving. This was the edge of the mold. So I left some extra material there. So when I went to separate it from the mold, I had something to grab onto. I pulled this away a little bit and then stuck my piece of wood. This, again, is nothing but gel coat. Someone did ask why I use gel coat. The reason why is because it gives a better surface finish than fiberglass. And if it was fiberglass, it would have that tan color and it would be multiple colors depending on exactly how much resume there was or wasn't. By using the white gel coat, the color's uniform. So you can pretty much see what this thing is going to look like without using quite so much imagination. All right, let me flip this over so that you can see the bottom side. You can see some places right here where the PVA dripped when it was being sprayed. I used one of those little sprayers that I got at Home Depot. You can get it at several places, but it's an aerosol sprayer that goes on top of a glass bottle, holds maybe half a pint. I put the PVA in there, it sprays a night mist. It's $10 for the bottle and everything. Those that know me know I hate cleaning anything. I'm just lazy. So by using that, I use my $10 and I can throw it away if I want. To me, it beats the heck out of using a real sprayer, paint sprayer, and then having to deal with cleaning it. Let me set my camera down for just a second while I flip this over. forward. And I'm only doing this so you can see the bottom side. See some of the areas that gave me a challenge. Okay. The front across here, as we saw earlier, I saw, I'm not sure if you did, came across just fine. This is one of those spots where the fiberglass didn't touch the PVA, so there's, I'm sorry, the gel coat. So the gel coat looks great, but underneath there's voids in between the gel coat and the fiberglass. Obviously not ideal. Some of those may come back to haunt me in the future because I'll be thinking I've got this done, and then I'll start sanding and I'll sand through and find out, oh crap, that's an area where the gel coat has no structural support underneath it. Hopefully I'll find those before it gets to that point. Again, more time and care in putting the fiberglass in. It really was a two-person job. I did it by myself. That's why it's not as good as it should be. There's a small void there. Same thing there. This is obviously the one where I flipped it over on its side and got this lip. Let me show you the lip and why that was a challenge. So you can see on the first side, the one over there, I just literally left it like this, and I had to convince the fiberglass mat that it wanted to go up and in, and gravity didn't want to make it fall down. I didn't do such a good job of convincing. You can see here that, maybe you can see, I'm going to turn you upside down just so you can see. Right there, it pulled away completely. So on this back side, there's literally a big hole right here that I'm going to have to fill in right there. Again, I was by myself. This thing was heavy and I didn't want to flip it over. Okay, I think that's got everything covered. Again, it's not perfect, and of course that's far from perfect, but some filler fiberglass that can be repaired relatively easy. A little bit of alligatoring there. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so obviously far from perfect, but it is good enough for this effort. I'm going to measure the thickness here out of curiosity, just to see how much a single thickness of this fiberglass mat is, but I know it's nowhere near as thick as the first pieces I made. Those were all exactly, or almost exactly, 100 thousandths of an inch. I used 2 layers of thinner mat, which I found out was a lot easier to get it to conform to the shape than this mat that I used, but it took 2 layers of it to do the same thing. And then I put a layer of cloth on the back side. So between the gel coat, the 2 layers of mat, and the cloth, it was almost exactly 100 thousandths of an inch everywhere. And for reference, that's this front end right here, and that back end for the same matter. But you can see I did this as a separate fender. I did this as a separate piece, and my thought was that I was going to have to widen it, and so this would be a perfect place to widen it. I thought I'd have to widen it 1 inch on each side, so I was going to put 1 inch spacer in between here, fiberglass it in, and then sand it all smooth. But luckily it fit without having to do that. So if I were to do it again, I would make this as a 1-piece front end, so I don't have to go through all that extra. Here is the side fender. You should recognize this from what I just did. And then there's the door that I did the same thing. I did the door separately, left the flanges there, screwed it together. There's where there was some bad alligatoring. Again, I was learning. I'm still learning, but anyway. At that point I was learning and found out what alligatoring is and how to cause it, and hopefully how to avoid it in the future. Wow. All right, I'm through. I'm going to go take a break. Probably drink a nice stiff drink or something. I don't know. But, oh, this part right here, I cut off of the original part because I'm going to use the C8 front end piece right here. I saw no reason to graft this on when I've got a perfectly good piece there. I could if I really wanted to. Put this in place right there. But the advantage of keeping this is all of the hardware to hold this bottom piece of the front end is built into this black piece. It's a bunch of screws, probably, I don't know, maybe as many as 50 screws, at least 25 across the front. So I would have to replicate that on this. I'd have to trim it, put a 90-degree piece and make it match that, drill the 25 to 50 holes. It's way easier just to blend this in. Okay. All right, that's it for today, or at least for now. Go ahead, like, subscribe, hit that alert if you want to see the next step of this, whatever that's going to be. I haven't decided if I'm going to now make the back end or if I'm going to clean this up and figure out how to fit it on the car. Just so you'll know, I'm going to show you what I'm going to put this on. Part of me hates to cut up this car because it's such a nice car, but this is a 2013 427 Corvette. So they did have a 427 engine in the 2007 Corvette. So I thought it would be cool to have a 427 late model Corvette 2013 underneath the body of a 427 1967 Corvette. Ideally, I would have a coupe and I would do a split window like on the 63, but this became available and it was a convertible, and it's a power top convertible. All my C5s are manual top convertibles. It's a royal pain to deal with. So I just saw this. The price was right. It wasn't cheap, but it was priced reasonably. And in this market, that's really, really hard to find. The interior of it is very nice. Again, it's really just a nice car. So when I'm done, it will run, ride, drive just like a 2013 427 Corvette, but the outside will look like a 67 Corvette. The engine has been modified. The exhaust has multiple cutouts so that you can change from quiet to medium to what's supposed to be very loud. Unfortunately, that actuator is broken and the previous owner can't find one. One of my challenges with this is that I'm pretty sure that these, I know the hood is carbon fiber. I'm pretty sure the fenders are carbon fiber. I haven't verified that 100%. But what's going to happen is, I think these fenders come off and I have to use part of these fenders to attach it to the car. Now that may not be the case. I won't know until I get into it. I do know I had to do that with the C8, but I was expecting that. If that's not the case, that would just be awesome. Because I would obviously rather not destroy these carbon fiber fenders. I am looking for another C6 that is not one of these, and it doesn't have to be, the body doesn't have to be in that good a shape, because if I do need to use part of the fenders, it will literally be just the strip across here that bolts to the body, and then I will graft that new body piece onto it. But the fact that it had that step where the hood goes makes me think that maybe I won't have to do that. Again, I won't know. The back area, I honestly have absolutely no clue how that works, especially because those molds were made to make a 63 with the split window. So it would have the factory hatchback, and that split window replaces the factory hatchback. This is a convertible, so it is not the same. And the seller did warn me that if I do a convertible, there is some modifications required to make that work. So I won't know until I make that back mold and then see how all of it fits or doesn't fit. Another concern is I don't think those molds are made for the wider body. You can see the fender flare here and on the front. So I may have an issue to where I either have to put fender flares on that car, or I'm going to have to widen the body, which is what I thought I was going to have to do with the C8. Again, I won't know until I get to that point. And that point will be when I start removing body panels from this. I thought I did a good job on the previous cars of putting all of the screws in the correct little baggies and labeling them and all that, but as I was going through working on the other C5s, I realized I didn't do nearly as good a job as I thought. What I'm going to do this time is I'm actually going to video it. Again, there's videos there, but I'd have to go through a lot. I've got over 100 videos now. So I'd have to go through all of those and figure out where all the hardware goes. This time I'm going to try to track it a little bit better. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm through rambling. So like, subscribe, hit the alert, and I'll be sure and let you know when I get to the next stage. Have a great day. Bye.